Golly gee, my tummy is rumbling and I'm so hungry, but all that's here to eat are these Tide Pods.
Timmy, don't do that. There's toxins and poisons that will ruin your intestinal tract.
Yo, Joe!
Thanks, Airman Rushmore. Now I know.
And knowing is half the battle.
G.I. Joe!
Welcome to the Rushmore Show, where it's all about your top four and nothing more. Kirk, man, we are in this month. It is nostalgia. It is one of the greatest feelings, man. I love it. It's memory lane, talking about all of this stuff from our childhood. Obviously, we have a little bit different eras, so we can talk about a lot of different things. Last week, man, such a great time with Joe talking about movies. In fact, I've watched Ferris Bueller's Day Off about 4 times since that.
Yes.
It's just a great movie. But anyway, so how have you been enjoying this month? How are you feeling about nostalgia, Kirk?
Well, first off, let me just share this. One, our Journey students came on 2 weeks ago, and they are the first show ever to come close to our original show with the breakfast cereal Rushmore. And that's just mind blowing. And this week, man, Joe was at the filming of this video. Joe just got surpassed in first place with his episode last week. So, man, we're growing. Nostalgia is awesome. I think it brings in a lot of people. And speaking of nostalgia, I want to bring in someone to our conversation about our childhood. But we have a guy today, and man, it is just an honor. And we met him through YouTube. We met him by following his show. And he has a show called The New 80s Revolution. And you can find him on YouTube. We're going to put the descriptions in the bottom. But I want everybody to welcome our new friend, Jason Knupp, to the show. Jason,
what's up, Jason?
How are you, bud?
Hey guys, this is awesome. Thanks for reaching out and getting this thing going.
Yeah, man. So look, briefly, just I'm kind of studying YouTubers and finding things and trying to make our show better. I look online, I put in the Google or the YouTube search bar, and I find who all is doing Rushmore shows. And there's not that many. There was probably about 4 or 5 entries that wasn't us, or Mount Rushmore landmarks, or the Rushmore movie. That was it. And you happened to put an episode out on your show about the Rushmores, I think, of fast food or something like that. And I saw that you were all about the 80s. And I started following your show, and realized that I really have a lot in common with you. I just relate to a lot of the things that you're doing. And I actually envy a little bit of some of the stuff you got. And I thought you were just an amazing person to be on our show. So first off, Jason, tell us a little bit about the New 80s Revolution, the show, who you are, and why you would want to come on our show to do cartoons for God's sake.
Oh man. Well, to answer that second part first, there's nothing represents 80s childhood better than cartoons. That played a role in our lives that I don't know if any other decade could match. Certainly not.
We'll talk about that.
Yeah, we'll talk. I know. I know we're dealing with something special here on the show. It's decade wise, but who am I? I'm just a guy that sits in a basement and talks to people about the 80s. I love the decade for so many different reasons. Some silly, toy related reasons, and then some real personal reasons too about why I think a lot of us would go back in time if we could.
Look, first off, before we get started, before we even get into our Rushmore, I just want to share a few things. So I was kind of doing some research over the last couple of days. I've been excited for cartoons. Andy, you know how much I love cartoons.
Oh yeah.
So before I give my criteria and all that stuff, I was like, gosh, what happened to, and I kind of thought about your show, Jason, what actually happened to cartoons? Because Now we have Netflix and we have all these streaming channels. And I was really thinking about it, and I was like, gosh, what happened to Saturday mornings? What happened to after school, before school? What happened? And so I was thinking, I was like, so when I was a kid, USA Cartoon Express was it, man. So that started in like 82 to 96. But also kind of coinciding with that was Nickelodeon. And so Nickelodeon's doing their thing, and Nickelodeon's kind of got puppets and all that. It's got all kinds of things, but the cartoons that were on there are, some of them are freaking iconic, right? Like this guy, right? So,
sure.
So we have some iconic cartoons that come out of Nickelodeon, and then it jumps to, I guess, like mid 90s, we go to Cartoon Network, and it brings Boomerang, Toonami, Adult Swim, all of those things. And I was like, okay, well, what about Saturday morning cartoons? And this is what I found out. Andy, this is crazy. So it says the Children's Act of Congress back in 1990. So the Children's Television Act was passed, and Congress wanted to limit. And now that I read this, I was like, gosh, I kind of remember that. But in 1990, I was 12. They wanted to limit the amount of advertising that was directly towards children. And I was sitting there thinking, well, that's why our freaking commercials suck so bad now, because I loved commercials because they were all targeted towards me as a child. There was toys and cartoons and
cereal,
video games and cereal, and all of those types of things. But now our cartoons are like, prescription medicines,
diabetes,
that nobody cares about the 700 things that you're going to tell me about, or insurance scams or whatever. And so because Congress thought it was a bad idea to market those guys, we lost probably one of the greatest things, waking up with your bowl of cereal, because cartoons started at, on Saturday morning, cartoons started at 8:00 Eastern, and they went all the way until 1:00 PM on a Saturday morning. Bowl of cereal. I mean, your kids are not, your friends are knocking on your door. You come on in, you watch cartoons together, ran all out and played till the lights come on. That is some of the best nostalgia memories I've ever had. And that's probably one of the reasons I not only like cartoons, but I like the 80s so much, because I remember going to that. There is not a moment like that for my kids. And that's unfortunate.
R.I.P. Saturday mornings.
Let me just say this. Everybody, stay in. We have a second segment this week, and Jason's going to kind of show us around he calls it the cave, but maybe just show us a couple of his collections or whatever he's got going. I know he's got something special planned. Don't jump off until you see the end, because you're going to really enjoy what Jason's got in store from the New 80s Revolution Cave. So, hey, man, Andy, let's get going, man.
Let's get into our Rushmore of cartoons. Let's do it. All right, guys, man, so excited about this one. Getting into our cartoons. What a better way to start it than sending it to Kirk. Kirk, the cartoon fan that you are, how did you narrow this list down, man? I know we were talking before. You've probably got about 6 pages worth of cartoons written down on your notes.
Well,
how'd you narrow it down to 4?
It is literally impossible. I'm going to cover my 4. There, that is all the ones that potentially could go on an honorable mention. So behind me, as you can see, I have a ton of really cool cartoons. Most of these are from the 80s. Actually, I think all of the ones behind me are from the 80s. But just a really, really big, long list. And as I was thinking about cartoons, man, I went through a phase right before I got married, where I was still in the military. I had a little bit of money to spend. I was buying video games. I was doing this, and I got just really nostalgic, and I started ordering off of eBay cartoons from the 80s. And they're really hard to find. So most of them were like dubbed. And a lot of the cartoons that are on my list were ones that I purchased back then, because I still have them. And I love them. They're a part of my childhood. They made me who I am. So here's the thing. Before I get going, here's my criteria. First off, this is a nostalgia show, so I'm going to do all of my cartoons from the 80s and 90s. I know there are great cartoons past that point. And quite honestly, if I'm a fan of cartoons, I love cartoons, But I would rather the animation back then. It's a little more simpler. But the animation today, the artists are just insane. But there is this style that most of these guys use. And it's like, gosh, I feel like I'm watching the same cartoon, or at least in the same world in 90% of them. And so I'm going to go back to 80s and 90s. Which ones did I watch the most? I more than likely collected a toy line from these guys. All of them obviously are just animated. There's no puppets. It's not half shows. It's not I started here, went there. This is something we always talk about, Andy. Theme songs. Theme songs are great. A lot of these theme songs, if you immediately throw out the cartoon, I actually think of probably the song in my head. Here's a hot take. I love cartoons. I do not like adult themed cartoons, and not necessarily where it's adult topics, but movies that are targeted, or cartoons that are targeted towards adults. So most of the ones all come from pretty much the same type of people. And then I'll end with this. If I'm on a deserted island, I have one VCR and I'm able to have 4 cassette tapes with a TV. And this is all I get to watch for the rest of my life. Which cartoons do I want to rehash? That's kind of where I went. And that's where I'm going. I know that's an extensive cartoon list, but with this many, I had to do something to eliminate them. And I can't. And honestly, I say this every week, but this is probably the hardest one for sure for me. Baseball was hard, obviously, because I'm a baseball fan. Video games were hard. I'm a video game guy. I'm still uncertain about my 4. I really am. I could change at any minute. I could turn on Netflix and they could add one of these series to it. And I'd be like, I'll start watching it. It becomes my favorite again. But I'm going to go with ones that I think probably made me the man I am, even when I was a kid. So there you go. And I'm going to start off real quick. Number 4, My Rosie, none other, 1992 it came out, starting in the 90s, but early 90s. I'm going to go with the X-Men.
Come on. I love it.
Yep. Look, this is the very first show. This is the very first show that I can really remember. And my criteria was very, very, very distinct about the VCR. This is the very first show that I can remember having that VCR in 1992, which that would have put me 8th grade, I guess, in 1992, putting that VHS in and setting it for Saturday morning at 7, timer, figuring that whole thing out so that it would record so I could sleep in a little later and not miss a single episode. And I watched X-Men like crazy. Look, I'm wearing the Juggernaut softball.
Oh, there you go. I was trying to draw the connection. I was like, what is he doing?
I'm wearing the Juggernaut softball hat. Our team was called the Juggernauts. I love X-Men. I love, my favorite characters were Gambit, obviously, because he's New Orleans. We're from New Orleans. Yes. But I loved the smart guys. Beast, man. He was so awesome. Juggernaut and Magneto, I thought, were just fantastic enemies. Magneto, don't sleep on that guy. He might be the most underrated villain in all of comic book lore. He is so freaking overpowered. Look, I am going to go. It ran 1992 to 97, man. X-Men, the animated series. And it to me, that song. Oh,
it's
there you go, man.
One of the best.
You know, I want to add to this, but here's a shock. I've never seen an episode.
Whoa!
I've never seen an episode. I was a sophomore in 1992, and I'm trying. While you were talking, I was trying to think back. What was I doing? You know, was I watching cartoons in 10th grade? I think I wasn't. I think I moved on to, you know, maybe like a Saved by the Bell type of
Right.
deal. My kid and I are starting to watch through some Marvel movies. He's watching Spider-Man from the jump, and he said, "Well, what about X-Men?" So I think X-Men the movies will be making its debut into our lives, and I hope that brings the cartoon along.
Nice.
Man, so there's my Rosie. I'm starting off hot. And here's the thing, Jason. I know you haven't been on the show yet, but number 4 is basically your line in the sand. Nothing else can get into this mountain because number 4 is announced. And so that's the one that's keeping the rest out. And so X-Men is strong. It's keeping it out. And I got 3 more bangers for me, man.
X-Men is a strong gatekeeper for sure.
All right. So Andy, what's your criteria? What's your Rosie?
Yep.
Show us what you got.
So real quick, the background that I have behind me, you said Saved by the Bell. This gives me kind of Saved by the Bell feel.
Yes, that's
So
right.
it's very, I am more 90s, and really actually 3/4 of my picks are 90s, and actually the one that isn't 90s is the 80s, but it was 2 weeks before the 90s. So, I mean, it literally like you could pretty much say, I've got 90s cartoons, all of mine. And when you think of the first one that I'm going to mention, my Rosie, your mind goes to 90s, right? So, but anyway, criteria, man, I didn't put a lot of thought into this. I had to like the show. I know that's a brain, like what? Like it had to be one that I was continually watching. I remember waiting for new episodes to come out and watching that week in and week out. And obviously, nostalgia month. There's a lot of nostalgia, a lot of kind of stories and things that I can think of that bring me back to these cartoons. So really, that's about it. There's a lot of honorable mentions. And I know at the end, we're going to share plenty of those. But this is that line in the sand, like you said so perfectly there, Kirk. This is nothing else gets in. My Rosie, my number 4. Talk about theme songs. This is another great theme song, iconic. But we're going to go with The Simpsons. I love The Simpsons. In fact, Simpsons is my only 80s cartoon. It debuted December 17th, 1989. So I was.
So essentially, it's a 90s cartoon because it's still going on.
Oh, it's one of the longest running, not just cartoons, but shows, programs in history. I mean, it's like Mickey Mouse. It's one of those just iconic. You see Bart Simpson, you know exactly what it is. Your mind is brought to this place.
Sure.
And I talked about this when we talked about arcade games. My George of arcade games, my number 1 was the Simpsons arcade game. I loved it.
Which is why I knew you were going to go there.
Grew up playing that game a lot. Man, just so many amazing things. And you said you don't really like cartoons that are aimed towards adults. This is kind of airing a little bit.
This is the one that started it. This is the one that started all of those style cartoons.
So I tried to look up when I was doing my research, give me an interesting fact about each one of these shows. Do you know, so all of the characters in The Simpsons have 4 fingers, right? They just have 4 fingers. There is only one character in all of The Simpsons that has 5 fingers. And it's none other than God himself. When God is in The Simpsons, he has 5 fingers. Every other character, you can fact check it. I don't know. Google told me this, so I might be completely wrong.
So I'm going to be very honest. I love The Simpsons back in my high school days, 92 to 96. I graduated in 96, so 92, 96. I loved them in high school because I felt like I'm watching a mature cartoon, and this is cool. I can remember like it just being like almost taboo to watch it. And then after I went into college and I started watching them, I really started to despise it. Like not despise it, but like go, gosh, this is a lot of the humor is very poorly taste. A lot of the humor is directed towards things that are innuendo. Right. And I think, I don't know. I just like, I got kind of snotty about my cartoons. And I was like, cartoons should be for children. You know, it's almost like tricks are for kids. Well, you know? If we're going back to, like we said, to the goats of cartoons, the goats, this may or may not make it on the mountain.
Yeah.
It doesn't make it on everybody's Rushmore, but if we're talking about the Rushmore, the longest running show, it's probably there. It's probably there. But yeah, good pick, good choice.
Yeah,
I thought you were going to go with a little higher actually. I thought you were going to go a little higher. But hey, well, so I'm anxious to see what you're doing.
I definitely think The Simpsons turned a page. I think they started writing a new chapter in, pushing limits of programming, especially cartoons.
They did.
I think it just started. I think it started a new trend.
And honestly, think about what I said earlier about the 90s Congress Act And then you bring out this, right? You bring this out, and it's kind of like, oh, you guys are really pushing the envelope. You really, I remember when it first came out, my mom was like, you can't watch that. and I was like 14 at the time,
I got sent home from school because I had a I'm Bart Simpson, who the hell are you t-shirt. And I got sent home. I think I was in 8th grade. I got sent home. I had to change my shirt.
That's so good. Good pick, Andy. Good pick. All right, Rushmore fam. We are at we're at a new mountain. Jason, welcome to the show. This is how we do it. We're starting with Rosie. Tell us kind of what you were thinking. We were trying to figure out how to narrow this down. What would be your top 4, and then and give us your first effort.
You've already mentioned honorable mentions, and the list is could be never ending for honorable mentions. So when I thought, okay, we're going to have to do 4. My Mount Rushmores, as your guys' Mount Rushmores, are exclusive to you.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times people go, what on earth are you talking about? But they, my criteria was, did I watch it? First of all, did I watch it? Did I choose it over other cartoons? Certainly, was there a toy line that I was interested in? But I think the main criteria for me was, did I watch it? I could sit here all day and name off cartoons that I probably have only seen a few episodes of, but they would be on somebody's Rushmore list because they're supposed to be. So did I watch it? And did it mean something to me? And so my first choice, the one that sets the bar, as you say, draws the line in the sand. Anybody who's seen my channel knows that my first love as a child was wrestling, professional wrestling. And growing up a Hulkamaniac, and certainly the foundation of my channel is the LJN Wrestling Superstars line, which was pretty much the only toy line I played with as a kid. And so wrestling was a big deal. Wrestling was important, and I ate up anything wrestling. Literally anything that had to do with wrestling. I was all over it. So in 1985, when it was announced that we were going to have a wrestling themed cartoon,
let's go.
I was blown away, because now we're taking so many different loves and we're putting them all together, and you're presenting it to me on a Saturday morning, which I'm already in love with. And now you're adding a wrestling cartoon to that. So my first choice is the Hulk Hogan Rock and Wrestling cartoon. Because it hit me right at a time when you could, look, if they had wrestling toilet paper, I'd own wrestling toilet paper as a kid, so to throw that at me, to throw the cartoon, and is it a good cartoon? But I watched it, and I was going to be there every single episode. And also a great theme song that was actually used in Hulk Hogan's Real American theme song, or the Hulk Hogan theme song. It's not Real American, but I loved everything about it. They had silly stories, very, very silly stories. You go back and watch it today, and it's odd. It's sometimes insensitive. We've got characters from all different cultures.
Yep.
And back then you could say some stuff and get away with some stuff. So some episodes highlight on these unique cultures, and that's weird to see today. But man, what a dream come true for a 9-year-old kid to see a wrestling cartoon hit the airwaves.
So I'm going to show my 90s and 2000s self. This is the first time I've heard of this cartoon.
No,
I'm pulling a Randy. I'm going to pull a Randy.
You uncultured swine, Joe.
Did you even have a childhood?
Well, I was, what you said, 85 here. So I was
85.
That was -4 at this time.
Oh, wow.
My parents weren't even married. So 85 to me is just a song by Bowling for Soup. That's the only.
And it went 2 seasons, so you wouldn't have caught it later. And it disappeared after it went off the air. It was gone. You couldn't.
So I'm Googling it, and Yeah, I see why it probably only lasted. I mean, like you said, yeah, well, and no disrespect, but I mean, like a lot of these cartoons, like you said, I can mention 1,000 that I love that just weren't good. Like when you look at the grand scheme of cartoons, and there's a reason they don't last as long as they do. But I love that you bring this up because even though I don't know it, this just kind of highlights the whole. It's about your top four and nothing more, right? Like there's gonna be a handful of people, I guarantee you in the comments, that are gonna know this one and are gonna have some memories and nostalgia related to it. But
yeah, if there's wrestling fans that are around my era, they freaked out when they heard that this show was coming.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's not good. I mean, it's jungle adventures. Wrestlers, the plane crashes and they're in the middle of the jungle and they have to it's not a good cartoon.
We're now past Rosie.
Yeah.
And we're going on to the next president. We got TJ Jazzy Jeff on here now. So where are you going to go with TJ Jazzy Jeff?
I'm going to go to an afternoon school cartoon. This cartoon came out in '84. It was for 2 seasons. It's had a lot of different reinventions over the years. It is actually a Japanese cartoon that's been brought back to us. And this was my favorite cartoon as a kid. When I was a kid, I ran home to watch this. And I was so upset if the bus was late or whatever, and I didn't get to see it. But I am going with a Voltron, Defenders of the Universe. Gosh, this cartoon is probably one of the only anime style cartoons that I just am in love with. I had these toys. It could possibly make next week as well. Stay tuned and figure that out. But I actually had where this was the original Power Rangers. And what happened was you had these 5 lions and they transformed like Transformers, and you put them together to make Voltron. And then that was the first season, because the first season was after Go Lion, was kind of the Lion Force. Voltron was after Beast King Go Lion. And then the second season kind of shocked me when I was a kid. I remember I was like, where's the lions? And they brought out this like car one, and it had like helicopters and spaceships and things on it. And I ended up getting that toy. So I had one of each. And then I had this big like remote control one. And that was like my favorite. I actually went looking these things up, and every one of them are worth like $300, $400, $500 now. And almost all of them are like in half, like not even in mint condition, like just junky. And they're still selling for like $500, $600. Mm-hmm. But this show was my favorite. As a kid, I wanted to drive the Black Lion, and it was one of the first deaths that I had ever experienced. And I remember episode 6, there's a guy named Sven, and he died. And actually, because he was in America and died, and they kind of dubbed it from Japan. It's actually much worse from the Japan episode. I remember watching that. But in our episode, they kind of dubbed it down, and he just disappeared, and then the princess took over the Blue Lion. But this was the original Power Rangers. This is why I didn't like Power Rangers as much as everybody else, because I thought it was a big ripoff. So, and I know, Andy, you're going to probably hate me on that because we talked about all that a little bit. But
those are fighting words.
Those are fighting words. Those are fighting words. But man, I'm just gonna nail it out right here. So TJ Jazzy Jeff, my number 2 on the mountain, number 3 on the list is gonna be nothing more than Voltron. Now there's my number 3. What do you guys think about that? Andy, that's probably way before your time.
Well, so Voltron, I know. I mean, this is one of the ones you have to know. I mean, even if it wasn't your time, it's just an iconic cartoon, an iconic show. I do remember though, I have an uncle who is not like tremendously older than me. Like he was like the cool uncle who was like, he was you guys' time, right? And they had so many toys. They had the Thundercats toys. They had all these things. But I do remember him having the die-cast like metal toys.
Yeah, the Bandai one.
Voltron.
That's the one I had. That's the one I had.
They were, like, as a kid, I was like, I don't know what this is, but this is like saber-tooth tiger looking thing, whatever, lion, whatever that I'm playing with, and it's made out of metal. And I remember playing with those. So I do have memories with it. Again,
here's a fun fact, Jason.
Way before me, but
the remote control one, I was looking it up last night. The remote control one, the very large remote control, was made by LJN.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And our friends, the Thundercats, as well.
so
All right. Well, Andy.
cool pick.
Andy, I've already got one up on you, so it's time for you to add to your mountain. What is TJ Jazzy Jeff, man?
TJ Jazzy Jeff. Okay, so I got my technically 80s cartoon covered, but we're gonna move into the 90s now. Not too far into the 90s though. In fact, we're only going to 1991. Okay, so 91. I am 2 years old at this point. Okay, so I don't think I was watching it in 91, but not too long after that. I remember one of my favorite. Actually, let me rephrase that. My favorite place to watch cartoons. My favorite network, hands down, Nickelodeon. I love Nickelodeon. In fact, I just recently, if you have not watched it, I hope you guys have. If you've watched the documentary, that's the Orange Years, Nickelodeon, the Orange Years.
I still haven't got it yet.
Highly suggest that. It's super cool. I don't know if it connects with you guys as much as me, because again, it was like, it's that 90s, like that was, I loved it. The whole slime and, just everything that was happening. Nickelodeon Studios, wanted to go there so bad as a kid. Anyway.
Been there, done that.
So in watching that and kind of in remembering things, this cartoon was one of Nickelodeon's first original cartoons. In fact, there was a set of 3 cartoons that all came out right at about the same time. And this is one of those. I only picked one of them. I could easily have picked all 3 because they're so iconic. My TJ Jazzy Jeff is Doug. I loved the cartoon. I loved Doug so much. Now, here's the thing about Doug. I just told you, I loved Nickelodeon's Doug. Eventually, Disney bought it out and it moved over to Disney, and it just lost all of its appeal to me. It was totally different. It's like different voice actors, a little bit different animation. It wasn't as good. But when I think back to, man, the theme song and like kind of the beatboxing and just everything that was happening, really cool animation. I love the story and everything. So the other 2 cartoons that this premiered with was Rugrats and Ren and Stimpy. So all 3 of those, right at about, that's the first 3 cartoons that Nickelodeon puts out. All of them are bangers. All of them are amazing. All of them, Rugrats has now been renewed, right? Paramount Plus has like a new Rugrats thing, and that has continued forever. Now, you go to like these stores and it's kind of like it's in like the whole like retro thing. Like there's Rugrats t-shirts, there's Doug t-shirts, there's Rocco's Modern Life t-shirts,
banger,
all this kind of stuff that's out there. And it's like, man, that was my childhood. And you almost kind of get that like old man syndrome of like, get off my lawn. Like, why are you kids wearing this stuff? Like, you don't even understand it. But I love that it is kind of brought back into that, because in fact, the only Doug that I can find right now to watch with my kids is the Disney one, because Disney Plus does carry it. So finding those old Nickelodeon ones is tough, but I've watched a couple old Nickelodeon cartoons with my kids. And much like you, Kirk, it's like my kids aren't super interested in it, but because maybe it doesn't carry over to today. But Doug, I loved the beats. There was this band that happened there. I Need More Allowance. I Won't Eat Liver and Onions, man, Banging on a Street Can. I loved all of those songs that they had. Killer Tofu, just a great song. And also, you had your superheroes. Both of yours, Kirk, so far have been kind of superhero themed. There's a superhero in this. Quail Man and Silver Skeeter were the 2 imaginary superheroes in this world of Doug. Patty Mayonnaise, Roger Klotz being the bully and everything, and BB, and just, man, I could go on forever. I love Doug. I dressed up going back to here. This is my last
for a concert.
for a concert.
No.
Yes, as Quail Man. So we had we did like a superhero theme show.
You got to tell Jason what that's all about, because
I was
he's
in
dressed
band.
up as multiple things for his band. He was Blanca from Street Fighter. He was Legion of Doom.
Legion of Doom.
He was.
That's beautiful.
What else were you?
Well, the Quail Man. So we had
Quail
and I was Mario one year. We had a couple years running where we played a show on Halloween. Every year we had like an annual Halloween fest, and my band always was like, let's have a theme for what we're dressing up as. So we're not just like random whatever, like it'd just be funny. And one year we did superheroes, and I told you before, I'm not like a huge superhero guy. And I was like, let me do something a little just kind of off the beaten path, like whatever. So I went full Quail Man. I wrapped that belt around my head to look like the quail. Yeah. I literally got a green sweater. I'm a drummer in a metal band wearing a sweater. It was the worst decision ever, but the costume, I cut out this red Q. I put the whitey tighties over my khaki shorts, man. I did the whole 9 yards, and I was Quail Man. It was a blast. But, so Doug, my TJ Jazzy Jeff, I love that cartoon. Love it.
I love it. What's so good about this so far is the passion that, because look, if you're zoned into your decade, right? If you're passionate about your decade, we've seen this from our grandfathers, our great grandfathers. They buy into their decade and they don't think anything else existed. Yeah. According to my grandfather, Babe Ruth, forget about everybody else. Babe Ruth is, the best baseball player of all time. And, there was no room to hear anything else. But what I love is like seeing the 90s passion. And because the disgruntled, cynical mind says kids didn't like anything in the 90s. But clearly they did, and it's fun to hear those stories about it.
So one of my favorite things about Nickelodeon, because let me just say, Doug, it was a cool cartoon. It was in a weird, it came out along, like you said, with Ren and Stimpy and Rugrats. And when it came out, my age allowed Ren and Stimpy to be in there just a little bit, but the other two were too kiddie or childish for me. And I remember watching Ren and Stimpy quite a bit, and it almost being kind of a secret like love that I didn't want nobody else to know because I loved it so much, and like them zooming in on all the crazy things and like like in his mouth the teeth, and there'd be things all real like kind of like SpongeBob does, yeah, like, and I was like, this is so cool, and they were very crude, little chihuahuas crude, but Doug was a cool cartoon. I've watched it since plenty times because I have a 20 now she's 22-year-old, and I guess about when she was in kids and syndicated TV, we watched a little Doug every once in a while, and Arthur and some of those cartoons that were kind of older from the 90s. But yeah, it's a good cartoon. It's a good cartoon. I would have picked one of the other two. Yep. But hey, it's not a bad choice. I love it. It explains you so much.
And then lastly, too, just I could relate to the character. Like, again, later, like he was just not. So he wasn't the cool guy for sure, and he wasn't the most unpopular guy. He was mediocrity. He was literally the middle, and that's who Doug was. And it's cool. He had his friends. He had Skeeter was his best friend, and I had my friends and things like that. I wasn't the most popular. I wasn't the least popular. I was just right in the middle of the rest. So I really like Doug. Really, really enjoyed that show a lot.
All right, Jason. TJ Jazzy Jeff is our fun name. Comes from DJ Jazzy Jeff. We love that.
Never heard of him.
80s and 90s. But hey, so we Thomas Jefferson. That's our number 3 on the mountain. Who you going with here?
Yeah, I'm going with the sleeper here. I'm going with an outside pick, but special, and there's reasons for it. So this again was, I think, 85, 80. I think 86. And the reason that I liked it so much was it was very, very, this is a very childish cartoon. None of the, I guess we could say there were some adult themed cartoons in the 80s. I mean, some that have already been on the list. Voltron certainly was not a not an adult themed cartoon as we would think of one today, but still a little,
Yeah, I get you.
Yeah, you know what I'm saying. So this one for an 8-year-old boy, a 9-year-old boy, 10-year-olds maybe is kind of a strange choice. I'll give you the name and then I'll tell you why. The Muppet Babies.
Nice.
Good choice.
Wow.
Love this cartoon.
The Muppet Babies is on my list because in addition to the action figure obsession that I had, or a particular set of action figures, our bedrooms in the 80s were way more important than they are today. My children sleep in their bedrooms and nothing else. Back then, I don't think I went into other rooms of the house much of the day. I was in my bedroom. I was playing. I was sitting. I was doing homework. I had a TV in my room from a really early age, so I was just laying around in my bed watching TV. And the Muppet Babies, the whole cartoon is about adventures that they create from their bedroom. And I was into imagination a lot as a kid, because I certainly liked being outside playing with friends, but I also liked being by myself and doing stuff and having adventures, and forts were a big deal, and building stuff in your room and things and the Muppet Babies is all about imaginative adventures that the cast comes up with. And then so half the cartoon is they're sitting in their playroom and they come up with a game to play or an adventure to go on, and then the other half of the cartoon is them actually going into the adventure. So they set up a space scene in their room with cardboard boxes and things like that, but then the cartoon actually takes them into space. And so the episode is based in space, but in reality, they're hanging out in their bedroom and they're playing. And so that was cool to me. I liked that, and I related to it as a kid. So it's on my list. The cast I love. Crazily enough, I was never a big Muppets fan, but I enjoyed the Muppets.
That's fighting words for Andy.
But there was a Muppet Babies. In this era, there's a lot of babies cartoons. You got the Flintstone kids, you got the Muppet
Scooby-Doo.
Babies, you got pup named Scooby-Doo. So you got these babies, and I love it. Barbara Billingsley, who is from one of my favorite shows of all time, Leave It to Beaver, plays Nanny in the show. And again, we've mentioned it before. Dave Coulier from Full House is the voice of Animal. And the drummer, by the way, Andy. So it's I love it. There you go. How great! Look at that. And that was completely unknown to me. So Muppet Babies for the just the adventure. I loved babies cartoons, not baby shows, but like I just said, take the adults, turn them into kids. I like the cartoon. And then Muppet Babies has some cool collectibles that I've got now, some McDonald's collectibles, and they brought it back. It didn't do much for me. It was a different style of animation. Yeah. But Muppet Babies, very important.
I'll say this. I love this show. It was one of my favorites. It's kind of one of those secret obsessions, as you will.
Yeah.
Like you're talking about. It's kind of weird. You almost think it was maybe even geared for little girls.
Yep.
But it was a great show. It was very brilliantly written. And the fact that you talked about it, you targeted the imagination side. I was a dreamer as a kid. I was an imagination guy.
Imagination.
The Muppets, if you've never watched this before, the Rushmore Show, if your first time here, Rushmore Show, anyone watching this, it's no surprise. This was my first tattoo. Actually, this was my graduation present from high school. My mom, I was 17. She walked in and signed off and then walked out. That was her saying, "Here you go." But I love the Muppets, man. So I'm so glad you made this pick. So David Coulier, he voiced Animal. But do you know, actually, the original voice of Animal, so for like 20 something episodes on this, was actually Howie Mandel. So
okay, yeah,
there you go. And then David, he did like 80 episodes, so he was the main one. But Howie Mandel was the original. So, gosh, I love the Muppets. I love everything Jim Henson. And obviously, like, this wasn't the puppet look.
And I mentioned in my game show that the Henson show might made it. It was
Fraggle Rock. I love Fraggle Rock. I love
Rock, man.
Sesame Street as a kid, just all that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
So,
Sesame Street.
but yeah, so it was everything that Pinwheel wasn't. Pinwheel was like Jim, not Henson. I don't know. It was trying to be. But hey, great pick. I love it. Muppet Babies. Awesome. All right, Kirk, halfway through our Mount Rushmores of cartoons. It has been a fantastic ride so far. I'm learning stuff. I'm enjoying myself. I know you guys are too. Where are we going to go for Link?
I just want to say this. Up until this point, every single cartoon, even the ones slightly mentioned, about are at least on my honorable mention. So just saying. So all of those episodes, all those cartoons are so good. This particular cartoon that I'm going to now. All right. So done my research again, looked it up. 1983 it came out. 1983. This is in the big toy boom. Probably, gosh, my most favorite toy as a kid. But I am going with none other than the G.I. Joe. And I'm going with G.I. Joe. Dude, I owned every freaking one of these guys. This was the collection that my mom threw away. And I really almost lost my mind. I mean, I looked it up. I was like, how many of these guys were there? And I think there's some people say 163. Some are saying like 150. I had even the ones where you mailed them in and you got the Cobra Commander with the weird hood. And there were all kinds of different toys. And I'm going to spoiler alert, it absolutely is on my list next week. It has to be. But G.I. Joe. I was really disappointed in the movies that came out, but it still was one of that. I love the idea that they tried to do it and bring it back because it was just that nostalgia thing. It was like, cool. All right. Kind of like what I said in the movie series when I said Ninja Turtles, and all of that. I just really, I'm not a big guy that's like, I hate redubs or any of that, but they just didn't do it well. But G.I. Joe, I mean, started with a toy line back in like the 50s, 60s. They looked like a Barbie doll. It was to combat the Barbie doll. And then they went to those little more smaller figures. And I remember that rubber band inside would snap all the time and get really irritating. And you'd have to basically throw your guy away because at 9, I didn't know how to put them back together and still.
That's it. That's why.
Yeah. But I remember like having everybody. My favorite were the Dreadnoks, but this isn't a toy commercial. This isn't the toy one. This is what was so cool about this. They targeted military. And this made me want to go in the military, to be honest. I spent 6 years in the Air Force, but I love the idea that it targeted every single branch. And the enemy that they were fighting, unlike, like wrestling, targeting Russia and the Iron Sheik and things like that. And you had Sergeant Slaughter, which is a G.I. Joe. They targeted this enemy called Cobra, which basically was the idea of all the bad guys. Up here behind me is Storm Shadow. And honestly, he was the coolest bad guy, in my opinion, as a kid. I mean, like, I always wanted to be a ninja. I talked about this in the Marvel issue. We always played ninjas, and I was Black Panther, and I put the ears on. But if not, I would put a white shirt on. I'd want to be Storm Shadow, and Snake Eyes is just cool. And look, I'll be honest. The new Snake Eyes movie was legit. It was really good. G.I. Joe, basically what this cartoon was, and I owned all of them. This is one of those DVD sets that I bought. I own all of them, and I tried watching them again, and they don't measure up for several reasons. It's a blast of the past and nostalgia. I still love it for that. But like, they don't use real bullets. It's like laser beams and stuff, like, because of all the different things that they wanted to do. But it brings in so many races, so many cultures, all the animals that were a part of it. And but it was basically a half an hour action figure commercial. Every time they brought out a new guy, there was a new guy on the shelf. And the best part about the toys was the cards and keeping those cards. And it was the first time I think I ever kept packaging for a cartoon for guys. And because all the cards were on the back, and that was just the cool part. But G.I. Joe, and here it is. You can't beat the PSAs from these guys.
Yes. Okay. I was waiting for you.
And Andy, I am the guy that when someone says something And they're like, if I hear anybody for the last 44 years, if they say, well, now you know. And I go,
And knowing is half the battle.
and it just has to happen. It's one of those things. And so G.I. Joe is my link. He's number 2 on the mountain. And it probably would be number 1, except for I consider the next one the best cartoon ever. So it's just amazing. And honestly, it does knock a lot off. I was thinking of a lot of those 80s cartoons, and I'm not going to say any yet because it might be my George. But there are a lot of them that I thought about putting in this spot because of the toy lines and because of the same area. But when I was thinking about them, this is the one I wanted to watch more than the others. And so that's why I picked G.I. Joe. So G.I. Joe.
I've heard of it.
You have?
Yeah.
I believe I've seen him on your show a few times, at least in the background.
So cool pick. I don't relate much to it. I mean, you're going even further back in time. You're in '83 now, so I mean, it's even further away from our wheelhouse. I mean, obviously, I know G.I. Joe. Like, that's not whatever. But as far as the cartoon, outside of knowing is half the battle, I don't really know much about it. So there you go.
Yeah, these two were so cool.
One of my favorite figures, right there.
Yeah, these two guys were so cool. Yeah, man, a great cartoon. I just love it. I love it. And yeah, it had to be on the mountain. When I thought of this, it was the very first one. And then we went from there. And gosh, there's so many other cartoons that I'm like, I want to put on the mountain.
This is one of those ones where if you just Google best cartoons of all time, it's on every one of the lists.
Yeah.
In some place, it's always going to be on that list.
I'm not saying much for a reason.
Oh, well, maybe we'll get there. Maybe we'll get there.
So all right. So Andy,
Okay.
who is your link? Who is your link?
This is another cartoon that's going to trigger you a little bit, Kirk. You're not a fan. And we've said this before. For a specific reason, I just love Family Guy.
Peter Griffin.
I love it so much. Here, look. So, gosh, it's another one that's been running forever. Okay, so we're talking. This is what, like 1990. I got it in my notes here. Once I pull my notes up because I'm very professional. 1999. So right there at the beginning. Almost year 2000, 1999. It actually debuted. I had to get this fact in here. Do you know it debuted right after Super Bowl 33? And you know who played in Super Bowl 33? Denver Broncos.
Falcons?
The Atlanta Falcons.
Falcons,
Yes, they beat them. I had to fit that in there, right?
Yeah, and by the way, who won that one?
Denver.
All my Atlanta fans will hate this right now. Because
the
Falcons fans because we're from New Orleans. That was one of those times the Falcons lost. Okay.
I had to get you excited about this one a little bit, Kirk, because I know you don't like the show. Family Guy, I love. So it's another cartoon to me, kind of like Doug, where my complaint about it is that later on, and kind of some of the newer episodes, because it is still continuing. And then they had like the branch off with like, the Cleveland Show and American Dad and all these kind of things that were trying to kind of like just spin off of it. And I feel like it's all kind of become one thing now, and it's not as good as it was. But man, there's been a lot of times. So I showed my tattoo of Animal here. I do have a tattoo of Gene Simmons from Kiss on my leg too, but I can't. Camera angle, it's kind of hard to do that. But Kiss has appeared on the Family Guy show multiple times. Kiss Christmas episodes and fun stuff. But man, when they do like the throwbacks and it's just like flashbacks to a previous event, and I can't even think of anything off the top of my head, but it is hilarious. I love his comedy. As I said, he's kind of like gotten to a place where I don't really care for it as much. It is one of those adult focused cartoons. But goodness gracious, I love, we actually used a clip of that in the music video episode because you said Take On Me by Aha, and there was a whole scene in Family Guy, and they just do these random things. This is one that I can think of. It's like, hey, I need to get milk. Yeah, reach for the one way in the back. And then he reaches way in the back and he gets pulled into the Take On Me video. And it's like this whole scene of him just dancing to Take On Me. It's hilarious. You've got Stewie is fantastic. Where's my money, man? And you got all of the characters. Gosh, I can't talk. It's hilarious. I'm dying, Brian, I'm dying laughing the whole time that I'm watching it. I dressed up as Peter Griffin one year for Halloween as well too. So
is there anybody?
I forgot to mention that as part of my criteria. I had to have dressed up of the no. It's
So look, here's my beef. Here's my beef.
Why do you hate it so much? Come on, tell me.
Well, one, at the time that it came out, again, I felt offended that they were intruding on my cartoons. Two, the time slot that they played them was obviously for adults. Obviously, like it was always like right after the news or like after a football game or something. I usually was on Sundays or whatever, following the Simpsons or whatever. But Family Guy wasn't too bad. It wasn't too bad. But when all the others started coming out, I was like, we're getting inundated with all of these cartoons, and they all are basically the same cartoon, just different families. Seth MacFarlane made a ton of money on this. He is a brilliant writer. He's funny. The comedy is good for the targeted audience. I just couldn't, I didn't laugh at it. It's Stewie. Like every time I saw him with that football head, I want to punt it. I was like, you're just weird, kid. And he talks like an adult. And it's just like, no. Yeah, I don't know. But I just wasn't a fan.
Let me tell you, the biggest compliment. Okay, so I don't watch it anymore. I've seen it. I've seen a lot.
I don't know that I've seen a whole episode.
Oh, I've seen multiple episodes. I don't watch it currently, but just because of time, whatever. The biggest compliment that I can pay the show, and I don't know if anybody will understand what I'm talking about. The biggest compliment I can pay Family Guy is that I don't laugh while I'm watching it. The reason I don't laugh is because it's too funny. I don't laugh. I just sit in awe of Seth MacFarlane's writing and how he can do the flashbacks, like you said, getting pulled into the fridge. Like,
how does he think of that? Yeah,
going there and just killing it like that. Again, it's one of those shows that I think says, and this is not a shot at the show or anybody who likes it. It's just one of those shows who says who we are today as a culture, as a people.
Yeah.
You know,
it's not a bad cartoon. It's just it will never make a mountain of mine. It's just not one of my favorites, because I'll even go back and say this. What you said about when we talked about the Simpsons, I think we're talking about goats of cartoons. This is a potential, at least write-in vote of getting Family Guy on there. It's just had such an impact on our culture. It's had an impact on cartoons. It's had an impact on comedy. It's had an impact on politics. It's had an impact on sport. Whatever it, I mean, you're right. He is a brilliant writer. The clips that I watch, I mean, Saturday Night Live steals it. People you see it in other cartoons, other things. It's a brilliant written cartoon. To me, it's just I just never could get into it.
Prior to Cleveland show and American Dad, and even like Ted, because again he did Ted, the movie.
Ted's brilliant.
Oh gosh! Prior to those things coming out, when it was just in its adolescence, like this show was just kind of standalone, its own thing. There was not a better cartoon for me, like where I was at. Okay, but again, quotes all the time. One of my favorite quotes, and I don't know how many people have seen this episode, but mentioning that Kiss was in it a lot. There's this one scene where Kiss is eating at a Denny's or something, and it's not even funny. Like, I'm going to quote it, and it's like, okay, whatever. But I remember Peter Criss, because the running joke with Kiss is that everybody forgets Peter Criss. He's just a drummer. He's whatever. Nobody wants to be Peter Criss, which is another quote. But they're at Denny's, and he's just really sad, and he tells the waitress,
"My grand slam was supposed to be with sausage."
You know, I don't know. I don't know where that genius comes from, that ability to write so fresh like that.
Yeah.
But, you know, I don't consider it like, you know, being an 80s kid, and, you know, my kids won't watch Family Guy because they have no idea what the heck they're talking about. And the humor is wasted on them completely.
Yeah.
But for me, if I catch an episode, if I'm in the mood and I'm sitting around and it's on and I watch it, I just sit there, and I like comedy, and doing my show. Sometimes I drop in some stuff and I ad-lib pretty much everything I do, and I improv everything I do. And I think I can have moments where I'm funny. And so I appreciate how brilliant his comedy is.
Yeah.
It just blows me away.
So I want to add this last comment to this. Remember how we talked about last week, Napoleon Dynamite? That first time that I watched it, I didn't really like it. Like Napoleon Dynamite was
Same here.
A George on our show for one of us. And I mentioned I didn't really like it, but also at the same time, I mentioned Old School. When that first came out, I didn't like it. There's other shows like Tropic Thunder and all that. When they first came out, I didn't like it. And I think I went through a phase about when Family Guy and all that was coming out that I just didn't like this type of humor. And I never went back to Family Guy. I never went back. And actually, because of Family Guy, I never watched the rest of them. I just assumed they're all like Family Guy. I'm not going to watch them. I know I would like them. But now, kind of like you said, Andy, last week, and not have seen Mean Girls from Joe, I'm kind of at that spot where I'm just refusing to cross the line to go watch them.
That's okay. It's a principle. You're standing on a principle now.
I'm standing on it. But look, I love Old School. I love Napoleon Dynamite. I don't necessarily love Tropic Thunder, but it's good. I mean, these are movies that I hated the first time I watched it. I'm like, this is so stupid. But now I get the comedy. It's a little different. I'm out of that phase. But anyways,
growing and you're maturing.
Maturity. My comedy is maturing. All right, man. So, hey, we are coming to Link for you, Jason. How are you? What you thinking on Link?
Somebody asked me the other day. I do a show. Well, I just started it back up again, but it's called the TN80s Hour Power Hour. Mm-hmm. And that's where people, the friends of the channel, get to send in questions. One of the questions was, if it weren't for wrestling figures, what toy line would you have cared most about? And the toy line that I would have cared most about, I would have cared most because it was so wrapped up in a cartoon. And I think you guys have like a little gimmick here called what is it, a Crushmore?
Yeah.
Is that what we call this thing?
Yeah.
Because my next choice certainly is G.I. Joe.
Nice.
Rushmore!
We knew it was happening.
You knew it was happening.
Knew it had to.
The G.I. Joe at one point in '84 was on at 6 o'clock in the morning in my area. And I was getting up for school. I don't remember, probably around that time. But that was the first show that 8-year-old me would set an alarm for, so that I could get up maybe 25, 30 minutes earlier to watch G.I. Joe from my bed in the dark at 6 o'clock in the morning during the week. I was not a military guy. I was not into military toys. Again, I had a few G.I. Joes as a kid. No toy line had a chance with me outside of the wrestlers. But the cartoon I enjoyed. And then when Sergeant Slaughter came on, now two worlds for me were colliding, because we got wrestler Sergeant Slaughter and he's joining the G.I. Joes. You mentioned it earlier, Kirk. The reason why that show was so fun was because it truly was, aside from the messages and aside from the cartoon, the theme of the show or the plot of the show, which was gripping for a kid at the time, and the stories were great. It truly was a half-hour commercial for the toys, because unlike any other, there's another that maybe might be mentioned, but there's another cartoon and toy line like you said, when a character was introduced, he was either on the shelf already or he was coming. I think
and the vehicles and the
oh my goodness, it's such a deep toy line. Did
anyone actually own the aircraft carrier? That's what I want to know. I mean, this thing is huge.
It is huge. There's a friend of mine, and he'll watch this. He's lovingly known as G.I. Joe Ron. He does have the aircraft carrier. I've seen it in person. It's ridiculous big.
It's like as big as a kitchen table.
So what I did was, because I didn't get to collect it as much as a kid, I started a show on my channel called "Collecting is Half the Battle," and it's me starting a GI Joe collection from scratch. And it started probably 2 years ago, and I'm looking at them now. I have all of 83, the figures complete, all of 83, all of 84, all of 85, and half of 86. And they fit right there. And they're beautiful, and they're on shelves, and they're labeled, and all the names are there. But the cartoon was good. I rewatched it about a year ago. We always use the Does It Hold Up? I watched the whole series. There was some really good episodes. There were some really bad episodes that I was on my phone the whole time. But the one thing you mentioned about the weapons and the lack of bullets, not only a lack of bullets, but a lack of accuracy. The
like
GI Joes,
these guys are stormtroopers.
They're the worst shot on the planet. Nobody ever got actually hit in the GI Joe cartoon except vehicles. They could blow up vehicles all day, but they could not hit each other. The bullets were the lasers were flying and nobody ever died, which again speaks to a different time, and I can appreciate it. But GI Joe is iconic. It's just legendary.
There's our word. Iconic. That's our favorite.
I coined visually iconic. That's my phrase from my show. The emblems and the promo pics, and like Pac-Man is a visually iconic thing from our childhoods. But GI Joe, hands down, 100%.
Awesome, Kirk.
Good
Why don't you tell
Great answer.
Okay, obviously we've talked about it. I know you're a fan of GI Joe. It's still your background right now.
It's time to change my background, though.
Yeah. So
it's time to change around. We're at the top of the mountain. We're at the paramount. We are at the peak. We're going to go at the top. And look, as much as I love the 80s, I'm going back 90s again because I just truly believe this is the best cartoon ever.
Come to your senses, 90s.
Yeah, and this was I remember watching this after school too. And if I remember correctly, it used to come out with the Ghostbusters, which is an amazing honorable mention for me. But I feel like they went back to back or something like that. This show came on Fox Kids, and it is none other than the Joker. Just kidding. Batman, the animated series.
Nice.
Listen, this is Mark Hamill's crown achievement. As much as I love Star Wars, he is amazing at the Joker. It introduces Harley Quinn. Actually, Batman is probably the voice for Batman is Kevin Conroy, and he's one of the better voices. There's so many good themes in this show. This is the show. This is the reason I went and found that bootleg freaking website, was because I really wanted to watch Batman the Animated Series and watch it all the way through. And I started it probably about 6 months ago, and I've skipped through and whatever, but I have been watching it pretty much an episode or two, every week, and it holds up to me. It is great. It is all of the action, all the characters. And as you've seen, Andy, you mentioned it earlier, almost all four of my cartoons are basically action figure superhero guys. And you knew I was that guy. I mean, but I have just a ton of other ones. I've eliminated a lot of really good cartoons. I mean, really, really good cartoons, really favorites of mine, and that have been on the show already. And this one hadn't made the show, and I actually mentioned it when we were talking about Batman and DC. I just think it's the crowning achievement for cartoons. I'll say this. Look, and I looked it up. IGN considers it the best adaptation of Batman ever. That's a big thing. IGN's a big deal in the comic world. It's a big thing in the pop culture world. They consider this the best adaptation. Wizard Magazine, which is, as we all know, kind of the comic book grading guide and whatever, it considers it the number 2 cartoon ever behind The Simpsons. And TV Guide, I don't know what 1 through 6 is, but it had it as the number 7 greatest cartoon ever. TV Guide. Wow. I didn't even think TV Guide was out at this time. I thought it was done by this time. I don't know. And my 80s friend over there, I know, has a TV Guide on his counter because I've seen it on his show. There it is. I don't know how long TV Guide ran for, but they actually voted it number 7. And that means a lot to me because there are so many good, I mean, if TV Guide did it, there's so many good 80s cartoons that are just really awesome. This was a different kind of animation. It was darker. It was greatly written. It was greatly drawn, introduced some really cool characters. I can't say any more about it. And literally, if Mark Hamill's not in this, I probably don't make it number 1. I think Mark Hamill made this, and it actually probably made his career because people probably would have forgotten him after his Luke Skywalker situation because he never really did anything else other than voice acting. Barely did anything else. But this right here, and look, I got my little guy right here. He played this guy, and the Joker was on my DC list. So there you go. Yeah, Batman's it. And so I really love the Joker. I love what this is. Andy, did you like this show?
I am so glad you brought this one up because I'm a big Batman animated series for all the reasons that you shared. Mark Hamill. But let me give you a side note. Mark Hamill also did another really great cartoon that is kind of lost in the lore of everything else. He did SWAT Cats. Come on, somebody.
Yes. Good. And that's another honorable mention. Cats. That's another honorable mention.
Rushmore!
Great one. I do love it. It's what I go to when I think of Batman. I think of Batman the Animated Series. They had some video games that were associated with that too, and kind of a few other things. So great pick.
All right, Rushmore Show. We are to Andy's George, and it's got to be the best 90s cartoon not called Batman unless we're Crushmoreing. So let's see what you got.
Breaking news, we are not Crushmoreing. As much as I love...
You're canceled.
Gosh, I love that show.
I am the new co-host, by the way.
Yep. That happened just now live in front of... Anyway, no, I'm not going to go with that one. I love it. I knew you were going to go with it. But this show, for so many reasons, was a clear-cut George. When we said this is the theme that we're doing this week, I knew this one was etched in. It was there. Nothing is moving it. It's my favorite cartoon of all time for a lot of reasons. It's so hilarious. To me, it mixes really well. It's not an adult-focused cartoon, but there's a lot of elements of that in it that adults can appreciate, but it's still also a kid's show. I began watching this with my dad. Really fun one to watch with him. Even to this day, he'll still watch it. In fact, my boss, my lead pastor, is a huge fan of this show. And I'm going to go with SpongeBob SquarePants. Oh, wow. I did it, and I'm so glad you have it. My George, SpongeBob, easy. I love this show so much. You've got SpongeBob, you've got Sandy, you got Patrick, you got Squidward, you got Plankton, you got Mr. Krabs. You just got all of these amazing characters. Debuted in 1999 and is still running. So it is. I believe it's actually the longest running Nickelodeon cartoon. In that sense, like continually running one. So I could be, you can fact check me on that, but I believe that it is that. I mean, that's quite some time right there to be running, 20 plus years. So, gosh, it's so good. It's hilarious. Like I said, it mixes to me like a Ren and Stimpy feel without being way too over the top. Yeah. Because it does have some things in it that's just a little, maybe pushes the envelope. That more so than a kid's cartoon, but still kind of stays within that. I'm cool with my kids watching SpongeBob. So gosh, so many quotes from this show. One of my favorites actually comes from Patrick. It's actually my favorite episode of SpongeBob when they're going to play like the halftime show of this Super Bowl type event, and they're forming the band, and Squidward has to put together this ragtag group of people who have no idea how to play music, and Patrick's part of it. And he raises his hand to ask a question, and he says,
"Is mayonnaise an instrument?"
No, Patrick, mayonnaise is not an instrument.
Another one that he says is, he's working at the Krusty Krab, and somebody calls the phone and says, "Is this the Krusty Krab?"
"No, this is Patrick."
It's one of the most iconic theme songs. In fact, I didn't even talk about this to my kids but literally unprompted the other day, my kids started singing the SpongeBob theme song, and I, of course, had to complete it, right? So we did the whole thing. Absorbent and yellow and porous is he, SpongeBob SquarePants. If nautical nonsense be something you wish. Anyway, I love this show. But originally, SpongeBob was supposed to be called Sponge Boy, but he was it was a copyright issue. There was a mop brand called the Sponge Boy, so they couldn't use that. And now he became SpongeBob. Can you imagine Sponge Boy SquarePants? Like, it doesn't have the same feel to it. But and then also, this was cool. The phenomenon of SpongeBob actually has impacted the scientific world. Okay, follow me on this. This is a little long-winded, so just follow me here. In 2011, American mycologists, and there's some crazy names I won't even pronounce them. There's 3 of them. They're like from Sweden or something. Who knows? I can't. There's like a B and then a V. I don't know who. Anyway, they first discovered a fungus that this guy collected in a national park in Malaysia. The fungus specimens had a musty smell and a sponge-like fruit bodies, is what it says. Analysis revealed that the fungus belonged to the genus Spongiforma, which gave it the name Spongiforma SquarePantsy. They named this fungus Spongiforma SquarePantsy.
I thought you were going to tell me the fruit smelled like pineapple.
No, that would be funny, right? So anyway, it resembled SpongeBob's own body, and then anyway, so it's pretty interesting that
I always thought it was interesting that pineapple was under the sea and not deteriorating whatsoever.
You know what fun part about this show too? They take baths underwater and they drink water underwater.
Yes,
and it's like normal.
Water is different underwater. We have come to the end of all of our mountains. We are at it. What is your George, Jason? What is your George? Can't be George Jetson, hopefully, but hey, we'll see. George. George of the Jungle. George. I mean, okay. What is
no Georges in this one, as far as I.
What is your top dog?
I'll tell you what. You guys have had passionate stories. We've all had passionate stories about these cartoons. They meant something to us for particular reasons. Again, we talked about action figures being included. I'm gonna, the selection is not, it's not a blowaway selection. Okay, I'll tell you right now, it's not He-Man, it's not Transformers.
Wow.
It's not any of the big Rushmore cartoons that you would think that would be a part of this concept. When I thought about, I said this in the beginning, did I watch it? Mm-hmm. And there was a cartoon that is not even made in the 80s. It's made a lot earlier, but the criteria for me, aside from the action figures, aside just from the cultural iconicness of it, that's where your He-Man and your Transformers would come in. It's, did I watch it? And this cartoon was always on in my house, whether it was after school, before school, random afternoon, Saturday afternoon, Sunday afternoon. It was just always on. I think it was
I know where you're going.
I think it was on every channel. It was just always there. And they were, I don't remember how long the episodes were. I think they were shorts. I think maybe you got 3 episodes per half-hour segment. No toys, no big deal. But my cartoon, my number one, my George, Tom and Jerry.
Nice.
Okay. And again, it's not going to blow anybody's mind. It's not under the Christmas tree. But it was, I thought about it, and it was down to Tom and Jerry or Scooby-Doo, because Scooby-Doo was always on as well. And Tom and Jerry was just a feel-good, sit around, nothing else is on, we're going to watch it. It's silly. There's no dialogue. We're not even talking.
We're not even talking. Yes.
No, there's no storylines. It's just a cat chasing a mouse, and the mouse gets, the mouse beats up the cat, and there was just there were silly themed episodes. I was a big bowling fan as a kid, and there was a bowling episode called Alley Cat where Tom ends up getting beat up by the bowling ball, and again, not a blowaway choice, but it was just always on, and I always watched it. It was just an absolute iconic part of childhood. It was down to that. It was down to Scooby-Doo. It was down to Smurfs, which were always on. But I went with Tom and Jerry.
That's a great pick. I when you said on all the time, and they were shorts, I thought of it was either Tom and Jerry. That was one of I was like, I think I know where he's going, or Looney Tunes, and Scooby-Doo. That's the three that were on all the time as young kids. I mean, I would say young kids, probably early 80s. I mean, even to the mid and later 80s, it was still on, but it had a really big run in the late 70s, early 80s, all those. And, Merry Melodies and all the things that they did. So
yeah, the Looney Tunes, that was up there too. Again, that was the Merry Melodies, that was always on.
Flintstones, Jetsons, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, sure. But Flintstones and Jetsons, you'd have to sit down and actually follow a half-hour storyline. And I'm thinking Tom and Jerry played a bigger role, maybe around 6 years old, 7 years old, 8 years old, where I wasn't interested in sitting down and following a story. I just wanted to be entertained by cartoons and colors and noises, and that was Tom and Jerry.
Cool. My kids. So I have an 8-year-old and a 5-year-old. So really, they don't have any business knowing Tom and Jerry. Is it even happening anymore? But something came on the other day, whether it was on YouTube or picture came across somewhere, and my 8-year-old said, "Oh, that's Tom and Jerry." I'm like, how do you it's not something that we watch here regularly.
They had a recent movie.
Maybe that was part of it, but it's like the fact that somebody born in the 70s, somebody who grew up through the 80s, or somebody born in 2014 can know this character. I mean, that just goes to show you how iconic it is. There it is again. We'll have to keep a tally of how many times we've said.
Oh yeah, drinking.
But it's one of those. It's an all-time great. Yeah, so I can't disagree with the pick. Fantastic.
Nice pick. Nice way to finish the mountain. I mean, I'm just going to go out there and say this: every single cartoon mentioned, not even just the ones on the mountain, but mentioned, are on my honorable mention. There isn't one that was mentioned that I was like, oh, I forgot that one. Yeah, they're on there. So look, let's do this. Andy, throw out some of your honorable mentions.
Okay, so
you're going to throw out some of yours. I know I have a ton on this list, so I'm trying to knock out as many where I don't have to say them again. So name out some of your honorable mentions.
Okay, so let's start with one that I always came rushing home to watch was Pokemon. That was, again, my time, so I loved the Pokemon show. It was really the only anime I cared for. But Dragon Ball Z, maybe another one too. Dragon Ball Z was a good one. I loved that one. That one was fun. But Nickelodeon, let me just talk about Nickelodeon for a minute. Okay, obviously you had Rugrats, Ren and Stimpy, like I talked about before. Hey Arnold was a great one. Angry Beavers, I loved the Angry Beavers cartoon. Cat Dog, Courage the Cowardly Dog. I think I'm going Cartoon Network now. Ed, Edd and Eddy. Man, all of these cartoons. The Animaniacs.
That's the one. I can't believe you didn't say Animaniacs.
Pinky and the Brain.
As a 90s kid, you didn't go Animaniacs.
I know, and I wanted to, but
that's the one when you said Tiny Toons, so you were going Animaniacs.
I could sit here forever and list them off, but this is just speaking to who I am. This whole 90s.
Dude, those are good lists. I mean, what about Rocco? Rocco's Modern Life.
Modern Life. Yeah. Absolutely.
Dude, Modern Life. To me, that goes in one of those very smart, brilliantly written cartoons. It's just really, really good with Heifer.
Bobby's World. Bobby's World. Do you remember Bobby's World?
That's my only write-in because you said Howie Mandel. I put up Bobby's World. I forgot Bobby's World. That was a great one.
That was a cool
one.
And
Bobby and Animal are kind of in the same ballpark as far as voice goes.
Yeah.
You got some. I know you got some.
Oh my goodness. I mean, like I said, He-Man, Thundercats, Transformers. And I liked. I
love how you're looking around your room.
Well, I got this guy sitting next to me.
Nice.
There
Oh
was
my
there was a
gosh.
very short-lived My Pet Monster cartoon. There was a cartoon with Popples, the Mr. T cartoon,
Oh, yep.
Pac-Man, the Dukes of Hazzard had a cartoon. It goes on and on and on and on. For honorable mentions, I'll give you 50.
Well, I have 50. I'm not going to say them all. I'm not going to say all. So all the ones you mentioned, you nailed out some of the big dogs that were really should have been on this mountain. He-Mans and the Thundercats, the Transformers. Those guys are fighting with G.I. Joe. I thought G.I. Joe was a better cartoon line with me. Transformers were cool. They were all cool. He-Man, I had almost every one. It was one of those ones where like new guy going, it's a commercial again. This is a commercial. Yep. And it was one of the first ones to do all that. So dude, I'm going to name a couple, man. Let's go with this. Captain N, the Game Master.
Yep.
The Nintendo cartoon of all. And then you mentioned some other video games like Zelda and Super Mario Brothers. Those are all awesome. Kid Video was so freaking cool. If you haven't seen this, it's basically a bunch of kids that go in. And the only reason that one's not on my mountain, I said it's got to be all animated. It starts out not animated. Here's one, Mask. The Mask 18-wheeler was the very first. Just in case my kid watches this show, it's how I realized the big man wasn't real. I found that toy, Cops, GoBots. My favorite, and look, my whole room was Shirt Tails from the USA Network. My whole room was Shirt Tails. I had them all over the place. It was crazy. Bonkers. How funny was Bonkers?
That's a good one.
Silverhawks, man. Silverhawks was so cool. Another action figure with Centurions, Visionaries, Captain Planet. Here's some good ones from later. Fairly Odd Parents and Phineas and Ferb. These two are just well written. You talked about the Smurfs. How about the Snorks? That was kind of like underwater Smurfs. This is a great cartoon. Look, there was a ton of Disney. There was a run of Disney cartoons, whether it was DuckTales, Tailspin, Darkwing Duck, or one of the better ones, Gummy Bears. Holy cow, that cartoon was amazing. I can keep going on. This list is so long. I'm wearing D&D. Dungeons and Dragons had a little small run.
Yes, that was a good. Yes.
Biker Mice from Mars. Gosh, I'm looking at all these, and I'm like,
nobody mentioned this yet. I'm waiting for you to say it, but
Gargoyles.
Gargoyles. Ninja Turtles.
Oh my God, that was my last one. Here's the thing. The thing. I wrestled with this whole thing over and over and over and try to figure out how to put Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles in here because it is so freaking amazing. And it's the one I was going to wait till last. Dinosaurs.
Here we go. Spin-off. One of my favorite.
I had to try and figure out how to get Ninja Turtles in, and I couldn't do it.
One of my favorite because of a toy line.
So good.
A toy line, and it was a ripoff of the Ninja Turtles, Street Sharks. I loved the Street Sharks. I had all those toys.
Alvin and the Chipmunks, The Tick, Jason the Wheel.
The Tick. Oh my gosh.
Garfield, Heathcliff.
Chippendale Rescue Rangers.
That was another Disney one, Rescue Rangers. What a great time to be alive, to where we can sit back and think about that. Talk about getting in the time machine. This is some of the reasons I wouldn't go in the time machine. This is what I would do to just sit in front of an old time TV at about 7 years old with a big bowl of cereal, watching 4 hours of cartoons, knowing the next thing on my agenda is going to get on my BMX and ride it around the block and climb a tree. I would do that 10 times out of 10. That's just awesome. It's been a fun time. But look, hey, we're gonna have another little second segment. We're gonna end this show really cool. And we're gonna go and jump in and kind of a bonus blast to the past. We're gonna kind of introduce a little bit of the new 80s Revolution show and what Jason's got. So we'll jump into that. Rushmore Show. Man, it's been a great time having Jason on. Jason, I see this building to be a pretty cool friendship. Thank you for being on our show. But I wanted to give you a little bit of space because your show is really cool. I mean, just me watching it, I think it's almost doubled in viewership. But tell us a little bit about your show and where you're going.
Well, thanks. what a great time. Fun to hang out with you guys. The new 80s revolution is my opportunity to enjoy a collection that I've started or established 20 years ago of toys. It started off as a collection of toys. It started off as a collection of toys that I had. That was the criteria for the collection at first. It was, what did I have as a kid? Let me go buy it back. And then that just grew into, let me buy everything that I can that makes me feel good. It's all 80s based stuff. And the collection started with toys, and then it morphed into everything that kind of represents the decade of childhood, the 80s for me. You can see over my shoulder, certainly a non-toy item that is special. It's a dust buster.
That's what I thought that was the whole time. I'm trying to figure it out. Okay.
What on earth is a dust buster? Well, it's a vacuum cleaner. And the reason that it's on the wall is because that's where it was. And if I try to put it up now, it'll fall. But anyway, the 80s was such a special time for me for so many reasons. Innocence and childhood and purity and different stuff than we have now, and stuff that we'll never have again. And so, as I looked around and had a finished basement dedicated to my stuff, my cave, I got a room of all my stuff. I thought, I want to share it. And so I, made a jump onto YouTube and the cave. I'll take you on a little tour. You just mentioned a few minutes ago what you do to sit in front of an old TV and watch Saturday morning cartoons. Well, I'll show you. I'm on a laptop, so it'll be kind of hard to. But I'll show you what you'd do. You'd sit and you'd hang out with that thing.
Nice.
And you'd watch your stuff, or if you want a bigger screen, you'll come and you'll hang out with that thing, and you'll watch your cartoons. But I have, we talked about the GI Joes earlier. I've got those over my shoulder.
Wow.
Those are all the GI Joe figures. We've got, kind of a collection of 80s stuff, I call it, right?
Chia Pet.
I see a Chia Pet in there, yeah.
We've got the alarm clock. We've got
the Garfield phone.
We've got the Garfield phone.
Oh my God.
There's the box that the Dustbuster came in. We've got a Fry Daddy from Everybody's Kitchen in the 1980s, right? Every single one of us who was born during this particular era drank Kool-Aid out of this thing.
Oh yeah, you got to push that button in.
That's right. You got to press that button. So, the collection started from this stuff.
Cool.
The LJN wrestling figures was all I ever played with as a kid. And that's the toy item that's most near and dear. We've got a whole bunch of, other toy items, the Dukes of Hazzard. We've got American Gladiators. We've got the plushie shelf. I'm trying to do this on a laptop, but the channel.
Teddy Ruxpin.
Oh yeah, there's a Teddy Ruxpin there.
Nice.
Sure. Teddy Ruxpin and his pal Grubby.
And look, we just like the last weekend or two, you have been preparing your set to look like an 80s living room.
Yeah, I'll show you. I'll do another little. Yeah, this whole area was all shelving and toys, Nintendo games, and everything was over here. And yeah, I wanted to do kind of an 80s set, so I went to Goodwill.
Oh my God!
I bought some old end tables. I got a phone and an answering machine set up there. That's actually my baby picture that was on the top of my television which
would be fitting in a 1980s.
Absolutely room. Right. And then we've got the other end table over here. Anyway, yeah. So I put some paneling up, and I wanted to do, like you said, like an 80s living room set. And just to capture the feel, because the fantasy of the channel, of me, is to someday have a second home that's actually totally decked out authentically in 80s furniture, 80s appliances, 80s living, right? So the home wouldn't have a Blu-ray player. It'd have a VCR, and I would want to make it as authentic as possible. But I can't do that now. So I take a corner of this room and I try to turn it into an 80s.
What a blast from the past. I bet like every time you go in there, you just like, oh God, you have a memory. That's what I love about nostalgia is it brings me to a specific spot where I didn't worry about bills and things and whatnots. And yeah, that's great. All right, Jason, you've inspired me. I had to go to my 80s style camera and get a little out of focus for you.
Yeah. I mean, you nailed it.
Look, tell our viewers, man, it's great seeing the cave. Tell them how we can find you. Where are you at? Are you on social media at all? Are you?
Yes, thank you. Of course. Yes, I do invite all of the fans of your channel come hang out with me as well. Look, you go into the YouTube. I think it's a website. You type in the New 80s Revolution, and I come up, and then you watch all my stuff. And yeah, I do the shows that were mentioned. I do a show called Whatever Happened To, and that's where I just say, look, whatever happened to Saturday morning cartoons, and we talk for a little bit about memories of Saturday morning cartoons and where they went. I have Instagram. I don't post anything. I think I've got like 46 followers. It's the New 80s Revolution on YouTube. More importantly, I like to know people as people. So my Facebook, which I think the kids don't use anymore, but my Facebook is just my name. It's right there on the screen, Jason Knupp. And so come say hello there. That's it. That's how you find me. Come watch the channel. I think you'll enjoy it. I do the Rushmore Show, not as well as these guys. It's just me. It's just one guy sitting in a room talking about stuff. But come hang out, and then I'm gonna make my people, all 3,200 and I don't know 78 of my people are coming over to hang out with you guys too.
Well, all 3,000, whatever, 278, welcome to the show. Welcome to the show. Awesome. And if you've watched this long and you've hung out with us and Jason and spent some time with us, this is what I'm going to ask you. One, we always have a question of the day. Obviously, our question of the day is, what's your favorite cartoons ever? But since you're new to the show, tell us in the comments who you are. Kind of introduce yourself. We all have different little taglines. And look, we've been learning this algorithm thing and how it all works. And we noticed that about 70% of the people that watch us just kind of watch us without even clicking the subscribe or anything like that. It literally is free. Like, that doesn't cost you anything. Hit the button. And obviously we'd like for you to watch through, and that helps the algorithm as well. But we're really trying to build this thing to something special. You guys know our heart. For all our new viewers that you might be watching, here's our heart. We're both youth pastors at heart. Andy is supporting a youth ministry. I do homeless ministry. And our goal is, if we ever get to a spot where we're monetized, that we're able to give back and help the people out there that, I want to reach the abandoned, the afflicted, the addicted, and the alone. And because it's people like me. And so that's one of the reasons we actually did this. And just a little fun get together with buddies, sitting at a kitchen table, if you will, talking about the old times and some of the things that we do. Andy, you got any last comments, man?
Hey, it has been a great time. I am so, we can do another Rushmore next week of cartoons and pick another 4. So, I mean, and we can continue doing this. You can make your own show about just the cartoons with how many that we talked about. This is obviously a very, based on your generation you're growing up and age you were during those eras and things. So I'm excited to read all the comments, right? Of like, there's going to be people who chime in, maybe who are even younger than me, that are going to come in with their.
Gotta leave your top 4. Leave your top 4 in the comments.
Yeah, definitely put your top 4 down there. Subscribe, hit the bell, do all those things that we talk about all the time. Make sure, again, in the description. You go check out the new 80s.
And in our description is all of our social media. It'll be all of his social media, all of the places to find us both. And we just thank you guys, Rushmore community. I shared something this week. We hit 150 subscribers. We passed 75,000 impressions, 4,500 views. Like, we hit all kinds of benchmarks this week, and the show is just growing. And we love you. We thank you. We'll see you next Rush Hour, man. So, hey, Andy, how do we finish this thing?
This is the Rushmore Show, where it's all about your top four
and nothing more.
Peace.